is it possible that you live in a more secure America than your mom when she grew up, or your grandparents or your great grandparents, and that the way they had to contend with their environments might not be the way you have to contend with your environment, even if it's not devoid of racism and its acts of violence and other acts of discrimination?
Well, it's hard to answer yes to that question, given the events in Buffalo. What I want to preface is something that is not really as prevalent with other minorities. Black people, many of us, have died very public deaths, like what happened in Buffalo. One of the tactics of keeping Black people, quote unquote, in their place or in their role or occupying a certain level is to make examples through the deaths of Black people, how they were murdered, the fact they were murdered, and be as public about it as possible. That's why lynchings had parties where hundreds of people would come and watch a Black person get lynched. So it's when you use the word stories in history, that sounds abstract. And what I want to emphasize to you, given the events in Buffalo, is the concreteness of the deliberate to make it public. There's a reason that perpetrator live streamed it to make it public. We die in public ways to send a message and still do. I'm gonna need a drink after this conversation.
Not
like notes, because I'm holding back tears as you yeah. I apologize for interrupting you, but this is really heavy stuff for me. This is really heavy stuff. These are lives.
Yeah.
You know, it's, and I know I may get flack for, because this will be made public, but it's the life of that 18-year-old who was radicalized. It was the life of the people who were taken, whose lives are no longer here on earth with us, who are now our angels. And it is the life of those that they left behind who now have to make sense of their world without the loved one in it.
Yeah.
You know, like this is just, it's 360 devastation.
And it's the life, which you're not including yourself, it's the life of
yes.
people who are impacted and feel a greater sense of fear, or just a continuation of the fear of, you know, could that one day be me, right?
And honestly, like, you know, because I was thinking about this before we started, you know, filming today, you know, because I cook a lot, and cooking, more about that later, but I cook a lot. So I'm always in the grocery store, and I'm like, you are so vulnerable in that moment, because I'm like, I'm not thinking about a shooter or dying. I'm like, am I forgetting something? What do I want for dinner today? Do I want to try a vegan recipe? But I'm tired. I don't want to try anything new. And he really did catch people at their most vulnerable. And Saturday, what day is Saturday? Running errands. You know, people are running errands, are out and about. Like, you're just living your day-to-day life. The events of last week definitely have made me much more aware, not just in grocery stores, but in public spaces in general. And so now I just have a sense of getting in and getting out, or minimizing the amount of time that I'm in some sort of vulnerable position in public.
Do you have any concern in your heart, in your mind, around your response empowering these acts?
In what way?
Well, by having the effect that they are perhaps intentionally trying to have among members of the Black community.
Well, I don't see how they couldn't. Like, I honestly don't see how you couldn't see something like that. And so some people, so my response of being fearful for public life safety in public and getting in and getting out, I think number one, that's a natural response. And for people who would find that empowering, yes, what you did had its desired effect. But I will say that the desired effect is not the end result. The end result is that, especially, let's take very concretely, the great replacement theory. They want us out of here. Now, my question to that is, we're not going anywhere. Jews aren't going anywhere. Black people aren't going anywhere. I'm an American citizen. You are an American citizen. This is my country. This is all of our country, right, wrong, or crazy. Yeah. And so you're in the short term, yes, you had the desired effect of making me more aware. But in the long term, your message and your efforts are futile because we're not going anywhere. Like, I mean, what do you expect that all Jewish people and all Black people are going to pack their suitcases and head back to some in their land where they all come from? No, we were born here. This is your country. This is my country.
Yeah.
We're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
My family has been in the state where I live for generations. So not only are we not going anywhere, we're rooting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Literally, my family's lived in this state for generations.
What I guess, what would it take for you to see events like happened, but write them off as a unlikely event in your life?
Todd, and that's where you and I differ. I just because I have really meditated on this about you, and I'll be quite honest, I struggle with this in our friendship because I don't see why you're so casual about these things. And
how you take it? You think I'm casual about this?
And maybe that's the wrong word.
No, it's really important. No, it's important for you to hear this. I want you to
I remember you have an uncle who's a rabbi. And I remember reflecting after our last filming and conversation. I'm like, I'm more like his uncle. Like I'm much more like his much more aware. Like, okay, this is a trend, and for me, I'm like, I guess like on guard, just looking for the next event, and will I be a part of the next event? So I find it hard to see it as a one-off incident because I feel like at any point that could have been me. Who's to say that, let's say I had family, in Buffalo, New York, and I was there visiting them for the weekend and I could have been caught up in that. Like, to me, I guess because the people who are perpetrating these crimes look like everyday people and they are attacking everyday people, I feel like I'm an everyday person, so it could happen to me too in anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things that you said. Well, let me just say, first of all, I actually don't know how my uncle feels about whether he should feel threatened. But there are people in my social circle who, as Jews, do feel like that Jews should be on guard. So that is a very real thing.
I feel like those people,
and you resonate with that.
I resonate with those people.
Yeah. I don't want you to think that I'm giving short shrift to your feelings and your concerns about your safety. I take it actually very seriously, if anything. And so, or to the events that make you feel fearful, that they're just, small things, because they're not. I take them seriously. I still think that in the larger picture, I don't know how many people have been killed through racially motivated mass shootings, or they don't have to be mass shootings, racially motivated shootings. But my guess is that it's just like with Jews, it's a pretty small number in that particular category. I can only speak for myself that, as a Jew who has seen that there's violence perpetrated against Jews, I guess I'm more on the ledger of like unlikely to happen to me, because of the rarity of it. Not that I don't think it's not problematic, not that I don't think it needs to stop, as you say. But just that I would have to see the magnitude get a lot greater and a lot more pervasive to feel like I am threatened in some way. And in the meantime, I don't know, that maybe that enables me to just like forget about it. That being said, that being said, that being said, let me just finish this. Is, you know, I've thought a lot, I've meditated on why we have this difference in feeling as well. And I'm not in places of worship, right? While some people might know the attributes of like a Jewish person and might be able to say, oh, he's definitely Jewish. It's not the same as having black skin, darker colored skin. And so I don't know if I could be picked out, and maybe that's part of it. And so I'm not in the places that one would target when they target Jewish people. I'm not someone, I don't wear things that, you know, I don't wear a kippah, you know, or the black coat, you know, a black suit with, you know, white undershirt. I don't wear the things that would help someone to know that I'm Jewish. And maybe people who do, you know, ought to ask me the question, like, if you did wear that, like, would you feel more threatened? And the true answer is I don't know if I would. My thought is no, but maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe if I was wearing that every day, and could be, you know, picked out, then I would feel differently. So there are, I just want to communicate that I understand there are differences that also could be factored into why the fear might linger for you and not for me around these incidents. So I don't want you to feel like I don't acknowledge those things, and how they might play a role.
I hear what you're saying about I'm not in the places that traditionally target, but what that can sound like to the people who are going to see this on social media is that you live an assimilationist lifestyle, so I'm good. And all the rest of you who don't live an assimilationist lifestyle, whether through dress or through physical appearance or whatever, then that's y'all. And I know that's not your motivation, but some people can take it like that.
I think that's a really good point. We should take up, but go to your second point.
And the second point is, for me, like the grandfather who took his grandchildren to the site and pulled them aside and had a conversation.
Yeah.
To not heed that wisdom / warning. Yeah. For me, is to contravene my ancestors, to contravene my granny, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-granny, to contravene my mama, my daddy, people who were trying to tell me this is the world's, whether right, wrong, or crazy, and whatever, the world's perception of you. These are the people who are in power, and these are the people who want for you to have a certain reaction. And you may have to have that reaction just so you can stay alive.
Yeah. Those are two super.
I won't contravene that wisdom.
Yeah. I don't think that should be a motivation to assimilate. Let me just say that. I don't think people should assimilate in order to not feel fear from someone who might wish them harm. And I'm just acknowledging a reality that people who want to stay true to whatever their heritage is, that's probably a concern that they have to feel. I'm just acknowledging it as a legitimate concern. Like, I think be who you are, be who you want to be, and don't let, if anything, actually, the person who says, I'm not going to assimilate in response to this person's action is almost, in some sense, saying the exact same thing I am, which is, don't give in to these people. Like, don't assimilate just because it's going to have you feel less fear because you'll blend in, right? Don't let this person instill fear. Don't let this person make you be someone who's not true to who you are. So if anything, that motivation to not assimilate and be true to oneself, or at least not assimilate for reasons that are not authentic, I would say their motivation is very similar to my motivation in not wanting to have these these kinds of incidents have broader effects on people. So
someone once told me that about being gay.
What's that?
Not to assimilate. I once was slash joking and serious, say, oh, I'm gonna leave the state because it's not very welcoming to gay people. And it was a gay couple that said, no, you're the kind of person that needs to stay. Like you need to not assimilate and do exactly what you just said. And that's what will change hearts and minds. Don't give in to the people that want you to leave.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, that's in terms of like where I stand on that. It somewhat relates actually to your second point around this feeling like in some ways you would go against your ancestors. Oh my God, we're just like we're so like rehashing or going over this kind of parallel example of the Black experience and the Jewish experience. Because I'm like now, even though I'm talking about the Black experience, I'm like in my mind I'm hearing the Jewish experience. I'm hearing all the prayers around what happened in Egypt and what happened when the Romans built their temple and when and obviously the Holocaust. So let me say this. I think learning techniques to self-protect and wisdom passed on in how to protect oneself and how to be aware of one's surroundings are all important, legitimate teachings.
My best friend sometimes jokes that Black people and Jewish people are cousins because she says, name one group of people that's cool with y'all that's also cool with us. Like we're cousins.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely parallels in our experience. So I take very seriously your bringing up this idea that, we need to take heed and absorb the wisdom from past generations. There is a balance at the same time between wisdom generated during one time in one context and the way it applies to our current context. There's the old, what is it? Story, proverb, whatever they're called, of the making of meatloaf, right? And the daughter is watching the mother make the meatloaf and cuts off the two ends, right? And puts it in the oven, right? And it's like, why you cut off the end? Well, my grandmother did it. Well, grandma, why did you cut off it? Well, my great grandmother did it. Well, why did she do it? And all of a sudden you find out, right, that she cut off the ends because that's how it made it fit in the oven, right? That was her context. You had to cut off the ends to make it fit. But now the oven is bigger, right? And you don't have to cut off those ends anymore. And so
you can add an egg to keep it from drying out. I get it. Different context.
And so my question would be, the question that your comment would raise is, what is the application of that wisdom in today's world that is different in the Jim Crow time, that is different in the slavery time, that while there are common threads, while these motivations still exist, and while they get acted upon, is still, we have to say, different from those times. And so how do we apply it now, but
very potent question,
also change with the time? So that would, I guess, and this is tough, man. This is tough. Like,
well, the Black community is struggling with it, with Black zillennials. So these Black zillennials are ready. Like, it's not the same way we were in the 60s and 70s and early 80s with sort of like slow change and all that. These Black zillennials hold us account. Like there's a saying, this is not your father's civil rights movement. Like they are like, we're not going to wait 100 years just to get a little bit of rights. We want what we want now. And there's no reason it shouldn't come to us, which has some people in the Black community feeling very uncomfortable because it's much more confrontational and ready for aggression than we were taught to sort of like, make inroads and present yourself in a certain way and negotiate and like, why should I have to do that? I should be able to come with the full definition of what I call Blackness and demand recognition as a whole being.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm somewhere in between those, I think. Somewhere in between, because I actually have seen this conversation between folks who grew up in the time of the civil rights era and younger Black folks today, and their conversation back and forth. I see the relevance, the wisdom from the past. I see the relevance of taking an approach that is going to build more allies than backlash, that create backlash, right?
Yes.
That you don't want to be not authentic, but you also want to be effective, right?
Yes.
And I hear, I hear that wisdom loud and clear. But I also hear, younger folks saying, you don't know, you don't know what our younger generation is like. Like, we can be out there and bold and not have backlash and actually build community through that. And so there's always like this struggle in younger generations of saying, how do I respect what got passed down, but how do I do it in a way that's applicable to today and is applicable to me as a human being today? So I would never ask you, Andre, to, what's the word, you contravene, to conflict with, to contradict, to ignore or neglect the lessons that have been passed down. And I would just, I would ask the question of, is there a different way that might be applied in today's world? Is it possible that you live in a more secure America than your mom when she grew up, or your grandparents or your great-grandparents, and that the way they had to contend with their environments might not be the way you have to contend with your environment, even if it's not devoid of racism and its acts of violence and other acts of discrimination?
Well, it's hard to answer yes to that question, given the events in Buffalo, because similar, when my parents were younger, from a statistical basis, were they gonna lose their life due to some racist motivation? More than likely not. But those same events were happening then, have happened back then, and were happening. So, just because I would say the garden has changed doesn't mean that we have any weeds that are differently than what they were when we first planted the garden. So I say, no, I live in the same America. It's just now I live in an America with social media and all this other different stuff. So things that would have been highly obfuscated, like, for example, had like an Emmett Till or something happened during a day of social media, that would have been viral worldwide. It was, for me, it was kind of the equivalent of I were George Floyd, right? Back then, like something so egregious that it was, sparked a response from the world. But just like Emmett Till happened, George Floyd happened. So I feel like the garden, yes, we may be in a different season, but the same weeds are in the garden.
So you think there's the same, you think there's the same prevalence of weeds? Do you think there's the same level?
Doesn't matter. A weed is insidious. Even if the weed has been cut down, if you haven't extracted, to use your parlance, the roots of it, the weed can still grow. Just give it time.
Mm-hmm. You want to say that there's a weed that still exists, that's the same weed, and because it's not tended, you don't see in your observation ways in which that garden is being tended enough to limit the growth and or try to get rid of the weed. You think that the protections are not there from that weed growing to an extent that would increase the probability of you being harmed in some way. Is that the story that you're worried about happening, that there's some weed, or do you think it already has grown to a large enough
extent? It depends on what part of the garden you're looking at, right? So a root system is just that, a system. So a weed could be prevalent over here, but not so prevalent over there. But when you look at the garden as a whole, when you step back and say, okay, what's going on here? That's what I'm doing. I'm stepping back and say, okay, what's really going on here? And then I see where the weed is proliferated everywhere, maybe not to the same degree, but it's everywhere. And so I'm saying that a garden that is not constantly tended will go to seed. And so in this garden of people's souls living in this country that we call the United States, we have to constantly tend that garden with respect to the weed of racism. And if we neglect any part of the garden, you can risk the entire garden going to seed and being taken over by the weed.
racism in what form, or expressing itself in what way?
In
right?
all ways. But to focus the conversation, rather, we're talking about violent ways, right? Because that's what was the catalyst for all of this, right?
Right. Because
and what I'm saying is that violent things happen in my grandmother's day, my grandparents' day, my parents' day, and they're still happening in my day.
Mm-hmm. And do you think the chance of that happening has largely do you think it's decreased over time? Do you think over what period of time? Do you think you see it as being at the same level and the same kind of prevalence across the country as was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 150 years ago? Like,
I don't have a real sense of that because I live in a day of social media where when those things happen in the United States, they become very visible events.
right.
And in my grandparents' day and in the day of my parents, they were much easier buried, right?
Yeah.
But what I will say is that the emotional message they're meant to send has never changed.
So that's exactly what I'm trying to kind of grapple with here is the role of social media magnifying the extent to which any given person, Black person across the country, might be threatened by the message, right, that is being sent. Is the way that social media and media generally, but just social media has a magnified effect, is its power to spread, to magnify the perceived extent of a problem and to provoke the strong emotions that create a response to that problem. Like, is it implicated in how kind of broad or vast you think this problem, how broad I don't even want to say think, because you just answered you don't know, right? We don't know. I don't know how it compares to 50, 100, 150 years ago. So I'll say the extent to which you feel that you could be.
I like the unity word we use, awareness. So to answer your question, it does heighten the awareness of the perceived problem, probably more so than it did in past generations, just because that magnifying glass of social media didn't exist. So is there a greater awareness? Yes, of course, because now instantly we can zap anything around the world. Yes. But is that the problem in and of itself? I don't think so. And is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, because the greater awareness of something being, or an injustice, or to use my analogy, the weed, at some point, someone's going to say, well, I'm just tired of this and we need to do something about it. So I see the social media. I understand like the broader point you're making, that it does serve as a magnifying glass, heightening the awareness of what we're calling a problem, what I definitely call a problem. But with that heightened awareness, it's a good thing because it's forcing people to decide, what are you going to do about it, right?
Totally.
It's the same way. Yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It's the same way that alleged perpetrator used their life in order to, cause the incident in Buffalo. When you're sitting there watching a video of something completely just unjust, it makes you like, whether it's about race or gender, et cetera, it does beg the question, like, this isn't right. And what am I going to do about it? Like, it does, people, not necessarily what am I going to do right now, but if this kind of thing crosses my path, it does ask yourself, how would I respond?
Yeah. So what you just brought up, I think, is also a really powerful point. Because I don't want people to think that my pushback against the I don't want to say I'm pushing back against your response, because I see it as a natural response, but my, asking questions into and wishing that response and its effects on your personal life weren't so great, right? So that's the thing that I wish were not so. But to your point about the motivation to change it as an issue, I have seen people use the lack of prevalence of these things in terms of the magnitude of the actual lives that it affects as a reason to push back on why we should really be focusing on it, right? And so you're bringing up, hey, social media is a net positive by bringing broader awareness and inspiring action. I don't think we should need to take action just because something isn't happening in every community across the United States. Like you said, these were lives that were lost. These are families that are affected. These are communities that are impacted. And so that, to me, and it's something, to your point of the weed, this kind of, we're being replaced in some way, and people getting animated by that, and kind of brought into this conspiracy theory of the way that the world is working. That's a weed that's growing. It's a dangerous weed, to your point. And so I am not meaning to say that our reaction should be muted such that we don't feel motivated to take action on the issue. My main concern is individuals feeling fearful in their lives, thinking, because of, it could happen to me, right? And so I need to be on guard no matter where I go. That's the worry that I have, not that this is magnifying awareness and thus building motivation, hopefully, for change. Thank you for watching this episode of Healing Race, and stay with us for a scene from our next video.
If you want to see more conversations like the one you just watched, please subscribe to our channel, share this video with friends and family, and like and comment on the video below.
If you'd like to be a guest on one of our episodes and have an open, real conversation about race, email us at guests@healingraceshow.com.
And if there are topics you think we should cover, we'd love to hear them. So please email your ideas to topics@healingraceshow.com.
As always, thanks for your support. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Now, here's a scene from our next Healing Race.
And your experiences too, because you have to understand, I don't know life from a white perspective. I don't know, like I said, it's the one thing that Black people can't buy is that white skin. I don't know what it's like to walk through life, and because to walk through life with that kind of support.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say privilege, because not every white person is privileged, and there are many white people who have worked very hard for the achievements that they have.
Yeah.
But there are institutions, there is a paradigm of thought that supports white people.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it's like to have that support.
To watch the rest of that episode, go ahead and click the video below me.
To see a different compelling Healing Race episode, you can click the video below me. We look forward to seeing you in the next video.